Shri Sri Gaurnitai ki, Shri Sri Radha Govardhana ki, Shri Sri Krishna Balaram lila Govardhana ki, Vidaya Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to the assembled devotees. Oh, glorious to Sri Guru and Sri Golden Road. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Reading from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Lila, chapter 10, text number 90. Shavadrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara. Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara. Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Shastradrishye Kaila Lukta Tirthera Udara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Vrindavane Kaila Srimurti Sevara Prachara.
Shastradrishye,
Shastradrishye,
according to the directions of revealed scriptures. Kaila, did, Lukta, forgotten. Tirthera, place, place of, excuse me, place of pilgrimage. Udara, excavation. Vrindavane, in Vrindavan. Kaila, did, Srimurti, deity. Sevara, of worship. Prachara, propagation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. In accordance with the directions of the revealed scriptures, both Goswamis excavated the lost places of pilgrimage and inaugurated the worship of deities in Vrindavan. Please repeat. In accordance with the directions of the revealed scriptures.
in accordance with the directions of the revealed scriptures,
Both Goswamis excavated the lost places of pilgrimage and inaugurated the worship of deities in Vrindavan. Purport. The spot where we now find Sri Radha Kund was an agricultural field during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A small reservoir of water was there, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bathed in that water and pointed out that originally Radha Kund existed in that location. Following his directions, Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami renovated Radha Kund. This is one of the brilliant examples of how the Goswamis excavated lost places of pilgrimage. Similarly, it is through the endeavour of the Goswamis that all the important temples at Vrindavan were established. Originally, there were 7 important Gaudiya Vaishnava temples established in Vrindavan, namely the Madan Mohan Temple, Govinda Temple, Gopinath Temple, Sri Radha Raman Temple, Radha Shyamasundar Temple, Radha Damodar Temple, and Gokul Ananda Temple. Om Jnana-timirandasya Giranjana Shalakaya Chakshurudintam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Bhatsam Pangumam Hayate Grim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master was very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, the Saviour of all fallen souls. By his grace, even a lame man can cross over mountains, a blind man can see stars in the sky, and a dumb man can recite eloquent Vedic poetry. So, Hare Krishna. Wonderful verse and enlightening purport as always by Srila Prabhupada. And the 3 holy dhams which are most glorified and worshipped by the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are of course Jagannath Puri, Mayapur, Navadvip and Vrindavan. And Jagannath Puri represents Krishna's Aishvarya, or opulence, the Supreme Lord of Vaikuntha and Dwarka. Specifically Dwarka and Kurukshetra are manifest in Jagannath Puri. And of course, Lord Jagannath, Lord Balaram, and Lady Subhadra are worshipped there with great opulence. I think 56 offerings of foodstuffs every day. There are literally hundreds of Brahmin families engaged in the service of their lordships, 50 major festivals every year. So, Aishvarya Gyan is a subcategory, you could say, of Bhakti Gyan, the knowledge of Krishna and devotional service, Bhakti Yoga. And one of this aspect gives us understanding of just how opulent Krishna is. He possesses all 6 opulences, as we always like to remind ourselves. Sad Aishvarya Puna is the unlimited reservoir of beauty, strength, fame, knowledge, wealth, and renunciation. So this is manifest in Puri Dham by Lord Jagannath, the Lord of the universe. And also, of course, the most famous of all Lord Jagannath's festivals, the Rath Yatra festival yearly. It symbolises the occasion 5,000 years ago where Krishna came with many of his wives and family members from Dwarka, along with Baladev and their sister Subhadra. Simultaneously, many of the Lord's friends and family from his childhood and youth in Vrindavan also came to Kurukshetra. It was a solar eclipse, and Kurukshetra is very famous as Dharmashetra, a place to go to perform sacrifices. So there was a very touching reunion between their lordships and all of the residents of Vrindavan, Nanda Maharaj, Mother Jasoda, all the cowherd boys, course, Rath Yatra symbolizes the residents of Vrindavan attempting to take Krishna back to the rural atmosphere of Braja. Drawing the chariots, Krishna came, of course, with all the Yadu dynasty from Dwarka in chariots, and he was dressed in royal garb as a Dwarkadish, the king of Dwarka. And there were elephants and cavalry and many soldiers. There was a cacophony of rattling sounds. And of course, the residents of Vrindavan, they said, Krishna, it's really nice to see you here in Kura, etc., but we'd much prefer to see you back in Vrindavan. They are our fond memories of you, your boyhood and youth. There, playing your flute on the celebrated banks of the river Jamuna, under the Kadamba trees, in the autumn and spring moonlight. So many wondrous pastimes were there. So that festival is there. And Mayapur, Navadvip, is described as Odayadam, or the abode of munificence, magnanimity, mercy. Odayadam. Because of Mahaprabhu's inaugurating the Sankirtan movement there, abode of extreme mercy. And Sri Vrindavan Dham is described as the abode of sweetness, Madhurya Bhakti Gyan, and that is very, very special. And of all the pastime places of the divine couple and their associates in Vrindavan, celebrated at the very pinnacle is Radhakund, the bathing place of Srimati Radharani, and of course Shamakunda is there as well. So we did a little bit of research regarding Radhakund, and it's very, very wonderful, and it's unlimited actually. The glories of Srimati Radharani's bathing pond. So, but before we speak about that, the origins of Radhakunda are very wonderful also. And they begin with Krishna slaying the last of all of the demons that invaded Braja. The last demon who came was Aristasura. And after dispatching Aristasura, not long after that, Krishna went to Mathura. So, boys might like to hear this. This is a demon slaying pastime, okay? Yeah. Aristasura, he appeared in the form of a gigantic bull. And he came charging into Vrindavan, it's described midway during the twilight. Gigantic bull. And he was pouring at the earth, snorting, and he was terrifying actually. So much so that some of the ladies and some of the cows in Braja at that time were so frightened that they had miscarriages. And his sole intent was to kill Krishna. So just at that time, Krishna was preparing to meet up with the gopis for nocturnal pastimes, including the rasa dance. So Krishna stood his ground, and actually one cowherd boyfriend was still present. He leaned very casually on that friend's shoulder, and Aristasura charged, and very nonchalantly Krishna was able to grab this gigantic bull by the horns and toss him on the ground and thrash him lifeless. You like this the way it was? Just like a wet piece of rag, thrash it and wring it out. So, yes, that's right. So that was the end. Aristasura. We forgot to, early on when he came charging into Vrindavan, he was passing small amounts of stool and urine. But when he left his body, he passed enormous amounts of stool and urine simultaneously. His eyes bulged in his eye sockets, and Krishna actually ripped out one of his horns and stabbed him with it. And he gave up his life and he went to the abode of death. People. So that was the end of Aristasura. Now, the gopis were watching all this, a very dramatic pastime of their prananath, Sri Krishna. And after cleaning himself up somewhat, the Lord was then eager to enjoy the company of the gopis. But Srimati Radharani was having none of this. She said, Krishna, you just killed a bull. You're contaminated. You have to, don't touch me. Don't come near. You have to first purify yourself by taking bath in all of the holy places throughout the whole three worlds. So Krishna realized that would take a long time, and so he said, well, I'll just invite all of the principal holy places here to Vrindavan, and I'll take a bath in them right here. And that's exactly what the Lord did. He struck his celebrated lotus heel firmly into the ground, and immediately all the personified holy places throughout the universe, they appeared there and poured their sacred waters into that hole. And Krishna took his bath, and that is, of course, the origin of Shyamakunda, also known as Krishna Kunda. And we know that Govardhan Hill is in the shape of a peacock, and the two eyes of the peacock are Shyamakunda and Radhakunda. So Srimati Radharani was still not 100% convinced, and she had her lieutenants there, Vishaka and Lalita. So they decided that they would do something similar, or even better. There was transcendental competition between the divine couple. So what we have here is some beautiful prayers, which I'll read out. And they are from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And they have been included here very, very nicely by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary. So, and there's a little introduction. From the Puranas, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has quoted 20 verses describing a joking conversation between Radha and Krishna that took place after Krishna had killed the demon Arista. This conversation, so kindly quoted by the Acharya, describes the origin of Radhakund and Shyamakund, Radha and Krishna's bathing ponds. The verses are as follows. I'm going to read with a little bit of dramatical intonation here, boys, just so that you really enjoy this. The innocent young gopis said, Krishna, don't touch us now, O killer of a bull. Alas, even though Arista was a terrible demon, still he was a male cow, so you will have to undergo atonement, just as Lord Indra did after killing Dhritarashtra. But how can you purify yourself without going to the trouble of visiting every single holy place in the three worlds? Krishna replied, why should I have to wander throughout the entire universe? I will at once bring all the countless pilgrimage places here and take my bath in them. Just watch. With this, Lord Mukunda struck his heel on the ground. Then he said, this is the water of the Bhagavati river, coming from the Patala region. And now, O holy places, all of you please come here. When the Supreme Lord had spoken these words, all the holy places went there and appeared before him. Krishna then addressed the gopis as follows. See all the holy places. But the gopis replied, we don't see them as you describe. Then those best of holy places, joining their palms in supplication, spoke up. I am the salt ocean. I am the ocean of milk. I am the Amara Dikhika. I am the river Sona. I am the Sindhu. I am the Tamprapani. I am the holy place, Pushkara. I am the river Saraswati. And we are the Godavari, Jamuna, and Reva rivers, and the confluence of the rivers at Prayag. Just see our rivers. After purifying himself by bathing, Lord Hari became quite arrogant and said, I have produced a pond containing all the various holy places, whereas you gopis must never have executed any religious duties on this earth for the pleasure of Lord Brahma. And Srimati Radharani addressed her girlfriends as follows: I must create an even more beautiful pond, so go to work. Having heard these words, the gopis saw that Aristasura's hooves had dug a shallow ditch just west of Sri Krishna's pond. At that nearby spot, all the gopis began digging up lumps of soft mud with their hands, and in this way a divine pond manifested in the short span of an hour. Krishna was astonished to see the lake they produced. He said, Go ahead, lotus-eyed one. You and your companions should fill this pond with the water from mine. But Radha replied, No, this is impossible, since the water of your pond is contaminated by your terrible sin of killing a cow. I will have my countless gopi companions, bring pure water of the Manasa Ganga here in billions of pots. In this way, I will fill this lake with my own water and thus make it renowned unequalled in the entire world. Make its renown unequalled in the entire world. Lord Krishna then gestured to a heavenly personality who was an intimate associate of all the holy places. Suddenly that person rose up out of Krishna's pond and bowed down to the daughter of Sri Vrishabhanu, Srimati Radharani. Then, with palms joined and tears pouring from his eyes, he began praying to her in devotion. O Goddess, even Lord Brahma himself, the knower of all scriptures, cannot understand your glories. Nor can Lord Shiva or Lakshmi. Only Krishna, the supreme goal of all human endeavour, can understand them. And thus he feels obliged to personally make sure that you can wash away your perspiration when you are fatigued. He is always anointing your lotus feet with the nectarian charu and yavaka and decorating them with ankle bells. And he rejoices and feels most fortunate simply by satisfying the tips of the toes of your lotus feet. On his order, we have immediately come here to live in this most excellent pond, which he created by one stroke of his heel. But only if you now feel satisfied with us and bestow upon us your merciful glance will the tree of our desire bear fruit. Hearing this prayer spoken by the representative of the full assembly of holy places, Sri Radha was pleased and said, So kindly tell me your desire. They then told her plainly, Our lives would be successful if we could come to your pond. That is the benediction we desire. Glancing at her beloved from the corners of her eyes, the daughter of Vrishabhanu replied with a smile, Please come. Her gopi companions all agreed with her decision and became immersed in the ocean of happiness. Indeed, the beauty of all creatures, both mobile and stationary, was enhanced. Thus gaining the grace of Srimati Radharani, the holy rivers and lakes of Sri Krishna Kund forcibly broke through its boundary walls and swiftly filled Radha Kund with their waters. Lord Hari then said, My dear Radha, may this pond of yours become even more world-renowned than mine. I will always come here to bathe and to enjoy my water pastimes. Indeed, this lake is as dear to me as you are. Radha replied, I will come to bathe in your pond as well, even though you may kill hundreds of Arista demons here. In the future, anyone who has intense devotion for this lake, which is on the spot where you chastised Aristasura, and who bathes or resides here, is sure to become very dear to me. That night, Lord Krishna initiated a rasa dance at Radha Kund, generating a torrent of the greatest mood of splendorous pleasure. Sri Krishna resembled a cloud and Srimati Radharani a brilliant flash of lightning filling the sky with abundant beauty. In this way, their divine glories permeated the expanses of the three worlds. As a final note, it should be mentioned that Narada Muni, being a great sage, understood that the killing of Arista more or less concluded the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. Therefore, Narada, anxious to facilitate the transferal of Krishna's pastimes to Mathura, approached Kamsa and addressed him as follows. So, that's not the end of the glories of Radha Kund by any stretch of the imagination, because they go on and on and on very wonderfully. So, we'll start with and as Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, it's by the kindness of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis, who and the other Goswamis who have also renovated Radha Kunda. So especially Raghunath Das and Jiva, they supervised the expansion of Radha Kunda in the year 1554. And Radha Kund, this pastime appeared, or Radha Kund appeared at 12 midnights on Bahulashtami, the 8th day of the waning moon in the month of Kartik. And of course, there is a big festival every year. Any devotees been in Radha Kund at midnight on that particular Hari? Oh, prabhu, fantastic. You should be giving a class this morning. Very ecstatic, huh? Amazing. Yes. So there we go. A wonderful festival. And if some of you have never been to Radha Kund, you might want to put that on your list of holy places to visit, especially if you can't get there for a little while. Approximately every 20 years or so, there is the cleaning of Radha Kund. And that was Srimati Radharani's baby pond was last cleaned in the year 2009. So in the year 2029, not that far away, there'll be another cleaning of Radha Kund where they actually they drain all the water out, and thousands and thousands of devotees assist with buckets, and all the mud is taken out. And then Srimati Radharani's pond is refilled. So 2029, mark that in your diaries. So, and originally Radha Kund was quite small, only approximately 4 meters by 4 meters, but now of course very, very large. And Radha Kund was where, of course, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami wrote this Caitanya Caritamrita after hearing for many, many years from Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, who lived at Radha Kund for 41 years. And it was at Radha Kund also that Srila Prabhupada got that very important instruction when visiting his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that if you ever get money, print books. So Prabhupada received that instruction at Radha Kund. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they would spend time at Radha Kund whenever they could, especially during the month of Kartik. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur built a house at Radha Kund. Braj Swananda Sukhara Kunj is the name of that house. Bhajan Kutia. And that was in the year 1900, and so from 1900 to 1936, our two wonderful predecessor acharyas would regularly stay there at Radha Kund and Bhaktisiddhanta lecture. And of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati startled some of the local devotees when he arrived one year at Radhakund by motor car, Model T Ford. And some of the local Babajis and Nansins were thinking, what is this, sannyasi? Because motor cars were very rare in India at that time, and here's a sannyasi arriving at Radhakund in a big motor car. So, of course, he was personifying Yukta Vairagya, Anashaktasya Vishayandataham Payundataha, Niyabanda Krishna Sambande Yuktam Vairagyam Uchite. That nothing so-called material, everything is Krishna's energy ultimately, so nothing should be renounced, given up, neglected that can be engaged in Krishna's service. So he took advantage of that model method of travel, conveyance, arriving there, even if some of the local devotees became a little excited about that. So, and Srila Jiva Goswami also installed Lord Chaitanya's footprints at Radhakund. And both Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, when he took a Braj Mandal Parikrama group of 1,000 devotees to Radhakund in the 1930s, he was touring for a number of weeks. All the devotees would go from one pastime place to another, lila shtanas of Krishna and Srimati Radharani and their friends. And when they arrived at Radhakund, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati instructed all the devotees not to bathe in Radhakund, but just to take 3 drops of water and place on their head. And that is considered the same, exactly the same, as taking a full bath in Radhakund. And Srila Prabhupada, he also instructed in the same way. There was the earliest time that Srila Prabhupada personally took a group of his disciples to different places in Vrindavan, and when they came to Vrindavan, it would appear either at that time or the word got to Srila Prabhupada that some of his, let's just say, slightly immature disciples were jumping and splashing in Radhakund. And Prabhupada wasn't very happy to hear that, so he also gave that instruction. This is not the way we respect and revere Srimati Radharani's bathing pond. So best just to take 3 drops on one's head. And of course, some of us, when we visited Radhakund, we've been instructed to immerse our japamalas in her sacred waters, so we've done that as well. And there are many, I have nectar of instruction. Of course, there are many beautiful prayers, or at least a few beautiful prayers. I might just read a couple of those now also. This is Srila Rupa Goswami's wonderful nectar of instruction. The holy place, known as Mathura, is spiritually superior to Vaikuntha, the transcendental world, because the Lord appeared there. Superior to Mathura, Puri is the transcendental forests of Vrindavan, because Krishna's rasa lila pastimes were manifest there. The superior to the forest of Vrindavan is Govardhana Hill, for it was raised by the divine hand of Sri Krishna and was the site of his various loving pastimes. And above all, the super excellent Sri Radhakund stands supreme, for it is overflooded with the ambrosial nectarian prema of the Lord of Gokul, Sri Krishna. Where then is that intelligent person who is unwilling to serve this divine Radhakund, which is situated at the foot of Govardhana Hill? Another verse, of the many objects of favour delight and of all the lovable damsels of Brajabhumi, Srimati Radharani is certainly the most treasured object of Krishna's love. And in every respect, her divine kunda is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. Undoubtedly, Radhakund is very rarely attained even by the great devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. If one simply bathes once within those holy waters, one's pure love of Krishna is fully aroused. That's nectar of instruction. So, And the excavation, which came a little bit after Mahaprabhu's visits of Radhakund, there was one rich man, devotee, Sampana, and he went to Badrinath in the Himalayas, and he wanted to offer a large donation of money there to Lord Narayan, situated in the temple in Badrinath. But that night, he had a dream where Krishna appeared to him in his dream and said, rather than give your wealth here, please go to the land of Braja. And in the vicinity of Govardhana Hill, you will find Raghunath Das Goswami. And please give this donation to him to excavate Srimati Radharani's bathing pond. So that's exactly what the devotee Sampana did. And it's interesting that Radhakund is surrounded in all 8 directions by the different kunjas, or celestial, beautiful gardens of the 8 principal Sakhis and Gopis. And beyond those kundas, there are a further 8 kundas, and they are maintained by Krishna's 8 most confidential Sakhas, his counter-boyfriends. So in that way, Radhakund is protected and maintained very, very nicely. And there are many quotes throughout the Puranas, such as the Adi Varaha Purana, which says, bathing in Radhakund is so auspicious that even the sin of killing a cow, a man or a Brahmin, is removed. And there are many other wonderful, glorious and beautiful descriptions of Radhakund in the Gita Mala by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and in the Govinda Caitanya by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And Janava Devi, the consort of Lord Nityananda, when she visited Vrindavan, she would spend considerable time at Radhakund chanting, and her sitting place is still there at Radhakund. It's celebrated and maintained very nicely. It's situated on the northern bank of Radhakund. So, and another wonderful feature of Radhakund is that, as Prabhupada was describing here, the 7 principal, most important Gaudiya Vaishnava temples established by the Goswamis, they are pratibhu murtis, considered non-different replicas of the original Vrindavan deities, all of whom, or most of whom, perhaps except Radha Raman, who managed to stay in Vrindavan, but many of the other famous deities installed by the Goswamis were moved due to the attacks of the Mohammedans, especially the 16th, 17th centuries. But Pratibhu Murtis, replicas of those original 7 deities, were all installed and are still being maintained and worshipped in Radhakund. So it's said if you live at Radhakund, then you can have darshan and visit and circumambulate all of those deities every day. You don't need to go anywhere else. And the Lord's famous Julan Yatra, swing festival, that also took place at Radhakund. And many Pushpa Samadhis are there of our predecessor acharyas, such as Srila Gokishore Das Prabhu Maharaj. And tomorrow we're going to hear a little bit about Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, our Prayojana Acharya. And there are 2 very famous stories, very briefly, of his residing at Radhakund for 41 years. Because Srila Sanatana Goswami was not very far away. He was residing especially during the latter part of his life. When he was earlier part of his life, he moved around Vrindavan extensively. But in his old age, he resided not far away at Govardhan, but he would regularly come and visit Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. And on one occasion he came and he saw that Raghunath Das Goswami was sitting out in the blazing hot summer sun. And actually Srimati Radharani was standing behind him and shading him with her veil. And Srimati Radharani actually had beads of sweat, perspiration on her forehead. So Sanatana Goswami, he mildly rebuked Raghunath Das that this is not good. We're not meant to be accepting service from Sri Radha, but rather we're meant to be wholeheartedly engaged in her service. So probably you should arrange to build yourself one small bhajan kutir so that you can sit in there, and especially in the blazing summer sun. So of course Raghunath Das arranged for that. And on another occasion preceding that, again, Sanatana Goswami came and observed that Raghunath Das was sitting outside on the edge of Srimati Radharani's kunda. And there were two tigers. They'd come down out of the forest and they were having a drink. And Krishna was standing in a very protective way between Raghunath Das and the two tigers, lest they cause him any harm. So again, Sanatana, as older personality, instructed that this was not a good arrangement. So, that's just a little bit, and that's taken us almost to time. So I can perhaps stop here and just see if anyone has a question or a comment. Do you have a microphone? No, there is a microphone. Nobody has anything. Or Krishna Kirtan.
Just for just a clarification, back to this beginning of class, Arastasura, you mentioned once Krishna killed him, he'd gone through the Dhamaraj, and I always understood that demons that attain liberation killed by the hand of Krishna.
Yes, yeah, that's my understanding also. So good point. We won't speculate too wildly, but perhaps he went in and I don't want to speculate at all because I've never read anything except that. But obviously Yamaraj, let's just say, went for a visit, had darshan of Lord Yamaraj, and from there went on to his next life. That's the best I'm going to offer. Anyone else want to add anything to that? But yes.
Thank you for the class. I want to ask a question. You were talking about that Prabhupada said that we should approach Prabhupada in a very humble mood, and it's a sacred place, so we put the drops of water on our head. And then we also hear Caritamrita, Caitanya. It's Prabhupada is saying that we shouldn't go to Vrindavan and live there, we should only go for a few days, otherwise we become familiar. And then we also hear that sometimes we're living in a town, but we may be living in a thin line. There's a fine line, living in the material world. So it appears that it's not the physical. So could you just talk a little bit more about the physically going to the Dham and also the consciousness? Because it seems like this portion is a big portion.
Well, Prabhupada did say one time you can't actually buy a ticket to go to Vrindavan. Though externally it does appear that you can, but you won't actually enter into the spiritual atmosphere of Vrindavan just by going there. Yes, one has to be in the proper consciousness And yes, it's true that if we still have material desires, we should just stay for, say, three days or a week or two. But if one is very serious and very sincere, and also it's said that one should always see Vrindavan and Mayapur as our true homes, though we may be living in outside of the holy dhams, we can always meditate that that's actually my real home. And Prabhupada does say, and I was just listening to a class of His Divine Grace yesterday, where he was mentioning, it was in Bombay, but he was mentioning how elderly devotees, they can retire. The sannyas ashram for some men means they go to the forest, or even vanaprastha ashram for older devotees. But no one is trained, Prabhupada said, to live in the forest. So Prabhupada said, so we have created our Mayapur and Vrindavan, and also he mentioned the Hyderabad farm, large piece of land, and of course we now have so many farming communities. And Prabhupada explained that vanaprasthas, they can go to these places and retire and spend in old age time there. So, and of course some devotees have been living in Vrindavan for decades, and they're still preaching in Vrindavan. They still have their service there, whatever, they may be directly preaching or predominantly hearing and chanting, doing deity worship. We have one god sister, her name's Radha Kundevi does it. Perhaps some of you know our Barbie. Radha Kund is her mother. And she, though her Prabhu Dutta Desh was predominantly with her husband, the state of Gujarat, and she lived in India since the mid-70s. And she's fluent in at least some Hindi and Gujarati. And when she's in Vrindavan, she, at least formally, she would regularly do some time manning the book table in the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And humorously, she's American, so she would wear a little name tag, which said, "Yes, I am American." Because many of us who have been to India, we know, we quite often get asked in a very polite and loving way by our Indian brothers and sisters, "Are you American?" "No, I'm Australian." "Oh." So Radha Kunda, just to preempt that conversation, "Yes, I am American." And then she would quite often converse with them in Hindi or Gujarati. So very nice, and she would sell the Prabhupada's books. So many devotees, of course, can't leave Vrindavan, and there is a type of sannyas known as Chetra sannyas, where devotees like Gadadhar Pandit, who was awarded Chetra sannyas by Caitanya Mahaprabhu himself, he'd taken a vow never to leave Jagannath Puri. And householders also, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is also described as a Chetra sannyasi. He'd taken a vow never to leave Puri. So in old age, definitely more and more devotees are going to retire in the holy dhams, preparing to leave this world. But of course, or performing a mixture of life in the holy dhams, becoming very much spiritually enlivened, and then going back to countries in the Western world or throughout the world and preaching the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham and Sri Mayapur Dham. So, and of course we have one dear friend who joined our Christchurch temple back in the 1980s. Perhaps some of you know him. Ami Atma Prabhu. Anyone know Ami Atma? He lives in Perth, yes. Ami, he's a great soul. And Ami Atma, I'm not sure what he's doing now, but at least until recently, he was living at Radhakund for 6 months of the year. But then the other 6 months of the year, he was in Perth, and he was going door to door selling Prabhupada's books. That was his life. 6 months in Radhakund, 6 months going door to door. So that's a wonderful program. Anything else? All right, I think the bell's about to toll. All right. Is that okay, Vaishnavi? A little something? Okay, thank you so much. Jai Shri Chaitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.